Do you know why I could hold these two terminals without getting electrocuted? Well, that's Ohm's law in practice. And if you know how Ohm's law works, you get a really good idea on how electricity would behave. And yeah, these two are live, just watch. So Ohm's law is really just a formula that we use to calculate the relations between voltage, resistance and current. So here I have an example. We know the voltage and we know the resistance in the circuit, but we don't know the current, which is really good to know if we want to size our cables correctly. As you see, these cables are quite thin. So before we go on, where I explain what voltage, resistance and current actually is and how we use them in Ohm's law, I want you to try to calculate the current in the circuit and comment it down below. But don't worry if you don't know how to do this yet, because at the end of this video, we're going to go through the circuit together and see if our theory holds up in practice. So voltage, which in calculations we use the letter U, which may be confusing to the Americans, since I know they use the letter V. But in most of Europe, we use the letter U, as it stands for the German word Unterschied, I believe. I think I'm saying that correctly, but it basically means difference. Voltage is the difference in electrical potential energy between 2 points. So to illustrate this with water, let's say that the top of the water in the water tank is point A, and the end of this tube is point B. They have a difference in potential energy since they are at a different height. So I'm sorry, I'm really bad with these camera angles, but what I was about to say, that point A and point B, I don't know which one's which, but they have a potential in difference. So we get water flowing, or electrons flowing in the circuit. Yeah, great camera angles. So if we bring both point A and point B together, they wouldn't really have any potential difference and the water wouldn't be flowing. And that's basically voltage. It's basically just a difference in potential energy between 2 points. And in this case, electrical, not water. Then we have resistance, and in calculations we use the letter R. And yeah, that's the same in both America and Europe, so you don't have to worry about that. But resistance is basically just how much the electrons get scattered or disturbed in the material it's going through. So take the difference between the metal copper and the alloy nickel. I don't know if you could even see this wire, but yeah, these two. So copper is a pure metal, so the atoms are more evenly arranged and the electrons get much less scattering, if it makes sense in my homemade drawing here. But nickel, on the other hand, is an alloy and is a mix of different metals. So it consists of nickel and chromium, and the atom structure of nichrome is much more chaotic and much less organized, so you get much more scattering in the atoms. So to break it down, resistance is basically how hard it is for the electrons to get through the material it's going through. So if you didn't quite understand what I meant with my drawings, I'm going to try to explain using water again. And this tube is our nichrome wire. It has a lot of obstacles inside, which makes it harder for the water to move through it, or yeah, through the tube. And this doesn't have any obstacles inside, and this is our copper wire. It's a little bit misleading since copper do have a little bit of resistance. So having a material with no resistance is basically a superconductor, but we're not going to go into that in this video. But the thing is, if you have a material with more resistance, it's harder for the water to go through. Much harder. So that's basically what resistance is. It's just how much scattering or disturbance electrons have in the material it's going through. Oi! Can't even see my shoe. It's so wet. Then the last part of Ohm's law is the current, or in other words, the amperage, which in calculations we use the letter I. That comes from the French word intensite. I think intensite. I think I'm saying that correctly, but I don't know French. That translates to intensity, and in this case, intensity of current. So it may be confusing that we use different letters for formulas and other letters for unit, or to describe the unit. So here's a quick breakdown on where to use the letters, so it kind of makes a little bit more sense, but yeah. So current is the amount of electrons passing through a point per second. So if you take a look back at the water experiment you just did, the electrons is the water. So the more water that's flowing, the higher current we have. So when I'm saying electrons passing through a point per second, that could be any point. So between this point and this point, 0.82 or 81 current or ampere is flowing. But between this point and this point, 0.46 or 2.47 ampere is flowing through. So that's what ampere is. It's just the amount of electrons passing through a point per second. So hopefully by now you have a basic understanding of what voltage, resistance, and current is. And now we're going to use them all in Ohm's law to figure out what the current in the circuit actually is. So as I said, Ohm's law is really just a formula. U equals R times I, but we don't need to find the U as in voltage, since we already know that. That's 12 volts. We need to find the current. So we could rearrange Ohm's law in a way where we could find a current. All we have to do is to divide R, the resistance, on both sides of the equations, which cancels out R and leaving out I, which gives us the new formula, I equals U divided by R. Take this new formula, which would give us 12 volts divided by 2.2 ohms equals 5 ampere. Yeah, so to see if our calculations are correct, we're going to test it with my multimeter, and we should be reading 5 ampere. So that's 1 and that's 2. And that gives us roughly 5 amps. And there we have it. That's how you use Ohm's law to figure out a missing unit in your circuit. But if you didn't quite understand Ohm's law in this video, I highly recommend this video by The Engineering Mindset, which has a really good explanation of what Ohm's law is, and his animations are really good. So highly recommended if you didn't understand it in this video. But hopefully you learned something in this video, and thank you for watching.